Hope everyone's doing well today. Just want to start off by welcoming you all to this class of physics. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Mr. Bliss. I'm really looking forward to kind of working with you all throughout the year. I'm kind of being able to engage in this subject that I really like, and hopefully we'll be able to kind of share a little bit about why I like physics so much with you all. As you can tell, I'm obviously not at St. John's today for our first day of school. I unfortunately have been selected to serve on a federal jury for the past couple of weeks, and right now it looks like they are estimating the trial will run to somewhere around September 3rd before we begin our deliberations. So these first couple class periods, unfortunately, will not be with you on campus, but we'll try to kind of do our best to get the ball rolling as we start off the school year here and start to do a little bit of kind of prep work for what we have that we're going to be covering in class this year. So to start off kind of this video, I want to just give a quick little introduction about kind of who I am, what the class is going to be covering, kind of what we're going to do in terms of going over kind of class syllabus and other sort of housekeeping things. So to start again, my name is Mr. Bliss. I've been a physics teacher for about 8 years, past 6 years here at St. John's. Really enjoyed kind of my time being able to work with students. Again, share kind of some of the excitement and the passion I have for this subject with you all. Hopefully we'll be able to look at a lot of kind of cool different phenomenon as we move throughout the year. But to start us off, just want to share a couple of things with you all. So one thing that you might notice is when you come to the classroom in the future and kind of unpack in person is that there'll normally be some sort of an agenda that looks very much like this one that will be up on the board. Basically, we'll have any sort of like in-class activities we're going to be doing throughout that day, as well as any homework assignments, announcements for tests, quizzes, things of that nature coming. So as you kind of see again for the agenda for today, this kind of introduction video is going to go over a few different things about course syllabus, class canvas pages, and then we'll do a little bit of housekeeping, kind of getting people signed up for an account we'll be using throughout the year. Now, typically, I like to kind of be a little bit more engaged in the first day of school, to be able to kind of do some sort of activity where you have an opportunity to work with some of your classmates, small groups. But what we're going to do is kind of table that until whatever my first day back is. We'll kind of get people moving a little bit, working on the first lab of the year, whenever it is that I might be able to return to campus after jury duty ends. But for today, pretty much going to just run through information of the syllabus and then give you all some time to work on these first two assignments. So this first one, reading assignment number 1, that's posted on Canvas. Basically just this kind of short page, 2-page article that goes over kind of why it's important to study physics, what are some sort of topics we might be covering throughout the year. Basically, just ask you to kind of read it and answer a couple of reflection questions based upon it. And then the second thing that we're going to ask you to complete prior to the next class period is the student questionnaire. It's basically just a way for me to get to know you a little bit more as individuals. I'll ask you things like, what are you involved in around campus? What are some of your likes, dislikes, favorite classes, things of that nature. Again, just to help me start to kind of put some names to faces as we move throughout the first couple of weeks of the school year. And then another kind of assignment that's going to be on your radar won't be due until next week. So you do have a little bit of time. But basically, we're just going to ask you to read over the syllabus, get it signed. There's also a lab safety contract we'll ask you to read over with your parents, sign it as well. And then lastly, we'll ask you to kind of acquire the materials that we'll go over in just a second. So again, that's basically going to be our agenda for the day. And then you'll have some assignments kind of work on for the second half of this class period. So during this time, I invite you, if you want to follow along on the syllabus on Canvas, feel free to kind of take it out, pull out that document. We'll go over just a few important things from it. So first thing I want to share is, again, if there ever is a situation that arises where you need to come contact me, whether it might be asking to meet for some extra help, but it might be notifying me that you are absent and maybe just notes or some assignment for the day, try to schedule makeup. The easiest way to get in contact with me is through my email. Listed out here, cbliss@stjohnschs.org. Again, it also is included on the syllabus as well. But typically, I'm going to be in my classroom in 418 after school until about 3:30 each day. I'm also here normally in the mornings before school as well. If you want to pop by, then you can do that. I'll be available during community time, and maybe if you have a free pair of the matches with mine as well. So if there is any time that you need to meet with me, want to schedule that, just shoot me an email, let me know, or talk to me before class, after class, and I'll make sure that we can kind of do my best to be accessible to you all as we go throughout the school year here. So next thing I want to cover is just a few kind of general classroom rules. Again, probably looks very similar to a lot of your other classes as well. But first thing, just want to draw your attention to kind of our updated kind of school-wide cell phone policy. Again, we're going to be a bit more stringent on this year. So we do require that your cell phones be put away in either backpacks or in your locker. Again, the repercussion if they are seen out, basically your cell phone will be confiscated. And for the first infraction, you'll have to then turn your cell phone into Dean Smith before school for about a 4-week stretch of time. And then if you're calling the cell phone a second time, then you'll have to repeat the process of turning your cell phone to Dean Smith before the school day starts for the remainder of the school year. So I just want to make sure we're again, not on those devices while in class. Next thing, as far as dress code goes, again, by the time you're junior, senior year here, most of you are very familiar with the St. John's dress code. The two things I do want to point out in particular are going to be sweatshirts. You can only kind of wear the approved St. John's quarter zips. So with that, one thing you'll notice is that room 418 here does get pretty cold, particularly kind of throughout the winter months. So even if your other classes might be much warmer, might be a good idea to just kind of have a jacket on hand with you that's school approved that you can throw on in class if it is a little too cold one day. Second thing with that is, again, when you are entering the classroom, just kind of make sure to do a quick double check that you're in uniform, so tucking shirts in, kind of making sure that you're squared away, ready to kind of learn when you enter. The next thing is, again, if you do ever have to use the restroom during class, just raise your hand, let me know, grab one of the passes. They're the green 3D printed ones that are up by the front board. You can just grab one and then kind of head off to take care of your business there. If you do, though, need to go somewhere else on campus, either see the nurse, go talk to a counselor, just let me know and I'll write you a hard copy of a hall pass to take. Now, as we go throughout the year, there's going to be plenty of opportunities that we'll have in class where I might say, all right, we're going to take the last 15 minutes class period. You can start kind of working independently on some homework problems or doing some extra practice. During those times, if you're a person who likes to listen to music to help yourself concentrate, more than welcome to use headphones. Just make sure that they're ones that you can kind of control with your iPad and not your cell phone. We do ask, though, that if we are doing something as like a full class, or I'm asking you to kind of work with your group members, the people around you, that you not be using headphones kind of during that time when we're working collaboratively. It's only during our independent work times that I'll allow you to use your headphones. And then when you come in to class most days, there's normally going to be either some sort of kind of bell work warm-up question, or might be some sort of opening activity. We just basically ask that you'll be ready to go once the bell rings. We'll start off with prayer, and we'll kind of jump into the rest of the lesson from there. As for our students who have accommodations, again, there will be a seating chart whenever I kind of return back to campus and we're having a bit more of our standard setup. But if you are someone who qualifies for preferential seating, just kind of let me know. I'll try to address all those requests if I can. And also, if you have extra time for testing, just know that the new policy this year is basically that's going to be guaranteed, built in for you, that we're going to just assume that you're going to make use of those accommodations. So if you have, say, 50% extra time for a test, just know that I'll give you a portion of the test to take in class. The second part of your test would then be for you to take in the test center later that day or first thing the next day. If you're a student who does not think they want to use that accommodation, just make sure that you email myself and CC your counselors and your parents. That's basically just notifying the school that you have the accommodation, but you are choosing not to exercise it. So again, that is the totally personal preference up to you, whether you want to use your accommodation or not. In that case, we just need formal writing if you are opting out of that. And other than that, basically just kind of ask that you all come to class prepared. I'm kind of ready to kind of engage in what we're doing. I'm going to do try to make physics. It's a very interesting subject, right? A lot of real world phenomenon we're going to be looking at through this year. So just kind of ask for your engagement, your curiosity as we move throughout our lessons. So next thing, kind of looking at our middle section of that first page in the syllabus. It kind of goes outlines, kind of the materials you'll need to have for this class. So the first one is our textbooks called Physics, Fundamentals of Problem Solving by Dan Fullerton. It's kind of very, very solid textbook, kind of does a really good job of kind of breaking down like concepts and explaining it in day-to-day language. So that's a iBook that you're able to purchase. It's roughly about $10. In the syllabus, probably the easiest way of buying it is just clicking the link there. It'll take you to kind of like the iTunes bookstore checkouts. You can kind of enter online payment information, and it'll pop up in your iBook app. So part of that materials check, that's again going to be due next week, is going to be showing proof that you have that purchased. And again, if purchasing the textbook is something that is going to be a financial challenge for you and your family, just let me know. You can either shoot me an email, and we'll kind of work things out, make sure that you're able to get those materials that you need, again, if you're unable to at the moment. The next item that we're going to ask you to have is going to be a notebook to use for physics. We'll talk a little bit more about kind of note taking in just a second, but something that I do is kind of require students to take notes by hand. Basically, there's a lot of educational research that goes into backing up why handwriting notes as opposed to typing notes helps you kind of learn information better. And then the last thing is having a calculator. It's really up to you. You can have a graphing calculator, you can have a scientific one, four-function calculator, right? They're all will work for this class. The big thing, though, is that you will not be allowed to use the iPad's calculator on a test or quiz. So you do need to have a physical one with you that you can bring for those assessments. So for that materials check, basically what we're going to do is submit photos or evidence that you have acquired those three things: textbook, notebook, and calculator. And you'll just be uploading that to Canvas for that materials check assignment. Now, going along again with this requirement for taking notes by hand, so there's been lots and lots of different studies that have kind of looked into this idea of typing notes versus handwriting them on a physical paper. And one thing that they found is that when you write something down by hand, right, that process of taking notes, of thinking about what it is that you are writing down, of potentially summarizing the information that we're covering that's on the board or what I'm saying, is that extra mental step helps solidify that knowledge in your mind. And more than anything, it actually helps build your application of that information. So in my class, right, there's going to be very few times when I'm going to ask you to just straight up memorize something. If you kind of compare physics to maybe say like your biology classes from freshman year, biology, right, there's a lot of terms, definitions, memorization that goes involved. Physics, we're much more worried about the application piece. So for instance, for this, something like if we were covering a particular, say, equation that governs some physical principle, right? I'm not going to ask you to just write out what the equation is. You're also going to be given an equation sheet, right? We're much more focused on how do we apply that equation to some new real world scenario. So with this, again, even though typing might be a bit quicker, right, we're really focused on the application piece. All the educational research out there shows that writing something by hand on paper is much more beneficial. And just anecdotally speaking, like classes that I've had in previous years, students that take notes by hand tend to perform much better overall in those tests and quizzes than students who do not take notes. So it's something that we will require you to do for this course. So next thing we have from the syllabus is going to be looking at kind of our grading system. So basically, we're going to have a category weight system. So it's broken up into these 4 categories. So 10% of your overall grades coming from homework, classwork, and participation. Then we have 20% coming from labs and projects, 30% from quizzes, and 40% from tests. Now, with our homework assignments, if you turn them in late, basically you receive half credit for those assignments, and you have up until the last day of that unit to turn in a homework that's late. After that period, then it gets entered as a 0. And for these, kind of depends on the nature of what that assignment is, but some homeworks will be graded on accuracy. Some of them will be graded on kind of effort and completion. And again, we'll talk more about those specifics once we get there. For our larger projects, so different labs, large assignments, for that late deduction, it's going to be a minus 10%. So basically a letter grade per day that it is turned in late. Now, when we're looking at these homework assignments, there's really 2 big categories that we're going to have throughout the year. So the first are going to be problem sets. So typically what we'll do is we might cover a particular concept in class. We'll do an example problem or 2 together on the front whiteboard, but then might break you off into groups for some additional practice. And that will all kind of build into a problem set that you'll do at home for home. So with these homework problem sets, key thing is that we want you to be showing all of your work. So this is something where we're not necessarily expecting you to have the correct answer for these, the very first time you try a problem, right? A big part of science is identifying what you know when you don't know, basically making a best first attempt of the concepts and material. And then what we'll do is the very next day, once kind of the homework assignment's been due, we'll then kind of go over those solutions, allow you to kind of make sort of corrections to that. So really look at homework as this iterative process, right? Don't have to have all the right answers the very first time you try something. In fact, there's bound to be at some point some concept throughout the school year where it's initially challenging. You might not get it right away. We're going to ask you to basically make your first best attempt, and then we can kind of use that going over the homework to help build and solidify your knowledge on that particular concept. So even if you aren't exactly 100% sure how to do a problem, we still want you to make your best attempt, right? Don't leave anything blank. At least, go through, maybe identify what you know and don't know the problem, make a guess as to potentially what equation you need to solve a particular question. You want to make sure that all work is shown. If all you do is leave an answer, you will not be receiving full credit for that assignment. The second type of video we'll have are going to be these Edpuzzle videos. For the vast majority of them, I'm going to be kind of going through and annotating, describing either some sort of concept, or maybe we'll be walking through a practice problem. And what we'll ask you to do is take notes on that video and submit them through Canvas. So anytime we have an Edpuzzle video assignment, again, this will start once I'm actually back in person on St. John's campus. But typically what we'll do is after that Edpuzzle video for homework, we'll have a short kind of mini, almost like a reading quiz based upon that content that was covered in the video. Just kind of incentivize, make sure that we're kind of watching those videos all the way through, really trying to engage with what that content is. So from here, we're going to do is kind of take a look at just a couple additional sections from syllabus. Just go over a few key things just so we kind of have the correct kind of wording we have from syllabus. So this first thing we have at the top of page 3 of kind of our makeup guidelines. So this is in the event that you are sick or absent for a day and you miss a test or a quiz. Basically, what we're going to do is require you to make up a test or a quiz within 2 days of returning to school. Basically, this is you're basically going to ensure that you have about the same amount of preparation time as a student who was in person and took the test or quiz as scheduled. Right? If we're letting 5, 6, 7, 8 days pass between our return to school and actually taking an assessment, we've kind of taken on this unfair advantage for amount of prep time we've had for that. So if you do not complete those tests or quizzes within 2 days of returning, there's a possibility of kind of deducting points from your overall assessment grade. Now, for quizzes are going to be made up just with me in my classroom. So we'll arrange the time. Maybe it might be community time one day, it might be during flex period, before school, after school, during a free period. Basically, you'll be taking that makeup quiz in my classroom for 18. If you miss a test, though, those will then be sent up to the test center for you to take. Again, if you are then absent on a day that is not a test or quiz, basically it's your responsibility to kind of make sure that you are caught to speed with what you might have missed. So this might include getting notes from a friend. You might be scheduling time to meet with me during community time to kind of go over that material. But basically, we want to make sure that you're kind of, even if you're out, kind of getting caught up with the work that we are doing. If you're out for extended time, so 3, 4, 5 days, just make sure whenever you come back to school, set a time, meet with me, so that way we can kind of, again, work with you, make sure that you get caught to speed with what you might have missed during that. And again, just a reminder that our new accommodations policy, right, is that you are basically automatically going to be given extra time on test or quiz, unless you opt out of that in writing to myself and your counselor. So as far as attendance goes in our next section, basically what we have is if you have an excused absence, so maybe you're sick one day, you're on a field trip, basically what ends up happening is that you get 1 day to make up your work for the amount of days you missed. So let's say you're sick for 2 days in a row, you come back to campus, that means you have then 2 additional days to make up any sort of homework assignments you might have missed. If you have an unexcused absence, though, you will not receive credit for homework that was due on a day that you were unexcused absent. And again, when you are out, it's your responsibility to kind of make up any sort of work you might have missed. Right, so that science is very collaborative subject in nature. So again, we do want to kind of reach out to each other, lean on each other. It's okay to kind of, ask a classmate for notes, for help to kind of get you caught up to speed. As far as our technology policy goes, so we do want to make sure that you come to class with a charged iPad. There's going to be plenty of times we're going to be making use of it for things like Boots, GimKits. We use a lot as like a data collection tool in our labs. But remember, just a reminder that for the notes we're taking, we are going to be requiring them to be handwritten notes. Again, based upon all the educational research out there, it just greatly improves student understanding when they're writing notes themselves, have to take that extra mental step of thinking about processing those notes before they write them down. And then the last thing, again, we want to make sure that we are using our iPads properly for playing games on messaging apps, taking photos, videos on TikTok, right? We're going to lose potentially iPad privileges for that. I want to make sure that we're kind of using them as a learning resource and not as a distraction. And again, when we're in class, there's going to be kind of no recording of any kind without prior permission from myself. So again, like for instance, in the labs, like there are going to be a fair number of times we're going to ask you to kind of record something that is related to your lab and data collection. We just do not want any unwanted photos, videos, audio recordings taken during class. So last 2 sections here. So looking at academic integrity. Again, just like in the St. John's Handbook, right? Cheating, academic honesty will not be tolerated. Even though science is a collaborative process, right? There's going to be plenty of times where I might say, all right, work with your small group on these couple of example problems, right? Any work that you are submitting and is being graded needs to be your own work, right? So we do want to make this very clear distinction There's a difference between collaborating with your, for instance, lab partners versus taking your lab partners' lab reports and copying it down yourself, turning in that work as your own. So, the distinction between collaboration and cheating. The other thing is that, again, our AI policy is basically unless explicitly permitted on a particular assignment by myself, you should assume that AI generated content is not allowed in an assignment. And then for our final section of our syllabus, so again, if there is ever a time in this class where you have a question about something, you have an issue, common concern about either the class, myself, someone else in your class, one of your peers, we're going to ask you to kind of follow this chain of communication where first, again, reach out to me. Should be kind of your first point of contact. If there is ever anything that you need, I will try to kind of address the situation on your own, especially for you all being juniors, something that we really do push you to kind of advocate for yourself. Again, just so you kind of build that practice. So instead of having parent reach outs, right, try to take on kind of the ownership, the responsibility to be that kind of first person communicate, to self-advocate for yourself. Come to me if you do ever have a problem or need something. Again, if we can't resolve out between ourselves, then sometimes we'll have our department chair would kind of be involved in those conversations. And then from the department chair, then it would be kind of work our way up to the assistant. Again, I do try to do my best to be very responsive to emails. So if it's something that if you've got a homework problem that you're working on, I'm sure, and you're just looking for a little bit of help, shoot me an email. I try to do my best. If I see it in time in the evening, I'll try to respond to it, or I might not get to it until the next morning. But again, I do try to monitor my email with regularity. And then last thing, as far as kind of what we're going to be covering throughout the year, physics very starts with this kind of idea of motion, right? How do things move? How do things behave? This first unit, we're going to be looking at what we call like one-dimensional motion. So we'll be introducing terms like position, velocities, acceleration. We'll go over kind of what that all means in the coming weeks here. But in addition to this, so again, feel free, please do read over this again with your parents at some point over the next 2 class periods. Again, the science syllabus will be due next week, either Wednesday or Thursday, depending upon if you're a scarlet or gray section. From here, just want to look at a couple things I want to point out about the class Canvas page. So on Canvas, again, the very top, there's going to be this section that will always be up there that says course info and helpful links. So our syllabus is assigned. Once we get to the first quiz, we'll kind of go over the sort of study tips, or things that I recommend to be successful, kind of how you should be preparing for those tests and quizzes. And then this last tab here for helpful links. Basically what this is just a collection of resources that I've come across throughout the years. So if there's ever a moment where maybe you're working on a homework problem and you're like, oh man, I'm a little shaky on this idea of acceleration. I'm looking for maybe a similar sort of example problem to look at, maybe a quick explanation on what those concepts mean. I would first start off with these different places. Instead of kind of aimlessly trying to Google search something, I would use this as kind of like my first place I would go if I'm looking for extra help. If, again, you're trying to do something on your own and you're unable to meet with me prior to that assignment being done. So in addition to that, those helpful links in our module for our first unit, at the very top, there's going to be this daily calendar. I typically will try to kind of fill it out for the upcoming week, so that way you have an idea of what topics we'll be covering. If there's any sort of homework assignments coming up, test or quizzes that should be on your radar. So this will kind of be my go-to. I'll try to make sure that I give people kind of fair warning, kind of what to expect as they come in, help them plan out their week a little bit better. For instance, maybe you know that there's a test coming up on a Thursday. So, but you have, a big Wednesday night away game or a play rehearsal. Or it might just help you plan your week out. Maybe you might need to study a little bit earlier in the week on a Monday or Tuesday, knowing that the day leading up to that test or quiz might be busier for yourself. And then the last thing is my notes for these different assignments. Again, you might probably do not have all of them listed on yours. Try to just kind of separate out for which ones were for scarlet periods versus gray periods. But you'll notice that some of these assignments have in parentheses at the very end a point value. So for instance, like reading assignment number 1, student questionnaire, right? Anything that is going to be graded and entered in the gradebook is going to have a point value behind it in parentheses. Whereas something like we'll talk in just a moment, say if you're in period 2 Scarlet and you're looking at this Edpuzzle class code, right? It might be just something that I want you to have access to, but you are not required to submit anything for these ones that do not have point values associated. So speaking of that last part of the Edpuzzle codes, one thing is going to be we're going to use throughout the year Edpuzzle. Right now, the plan is going to have roughly 1 problem set and 1 Edpuzzle assignment for homework kind of per week. So with this, I strongly recommend if you do not already have an Edpuzzle account, you're making one for the very first time, please make sure that you are using your St. John's email address. Just makes help resetting passwords a little bit easier in the future if that is ever a need. And you should have an assignment on your Canvas page that references both what period number you're in, as well as if you're in either a scarlet or a gray section. That assignment should have the class code you'll need to add yourself to that particular section's Edpuzzle. So for classwork today, just kind of make sure that you sign up for that Edpuzzle account, and then just a reminder that the 2 things are going to be due 8 a.m. before your next time this class meets is going to be this reading assignment number 1. Again, there's an article linked that's going to ask you to kind of read through it. It's a little quick overview of what physics is, why it's important to study. We'll ask you to answer a couple reflection questions. You can either write out those reflection answers on paper and submit a photo of that, or you can just write them out, type them out in Knowbility. I'll kind of leave that up to your personal preference. For the student questionnaire, there's a link to a Microsoft form that you should have access to. Basically, all you're going to do is kind of answer the questions that are on the survey and then hit submit at the end. Nothing needs to be sent through Canvas for that assignment. And then lastly, again, if you want to kind of work ahead, start getting the syllabus signed, start acquiring your materials of the textbook, notebook, and calculator. And then lastly, signing the lab safety contract. Again, those will all be due next Wednesday, Thursday, depending upon your scarlet or gray section. But again, that's going to be kind of it for what we have for today. Again, thank you for your attention to this video. Again, I do very much apologize that I'm not there in person. Very much looking forward to being back on campus in the near future and getting a chance to learn and kind of work with you all this year. As far as next class, I'll be in touch. I'll send something out through Canvas, whether or not you'll be reporting to the classroom again and have a proctor, or there might be just a chance you'll have a free period or go somewhere else in Canvas. We're still kind of working those details out, but I will be sure to let you all know as soon as school has made a determination on how your second class period should look. But again, looking for a great year. Hopefully you'll have a great rest of your day.